it's much easier to teach people how to brew coffee than it is to teach people how to engage with customers. So in the beginning, we used to hire people from other coffee brands who were baristas because we thought, okay, that'll give them a head start. But actually what's more difficult and harder to do is train people to have the confidence to engage with customers.
Welcome to the Daily Coffee Pro by Map It Forward, friends. I'm your host, Lee Safar, and this is episode 3 of our 5-part series with Matt from Blue Tokai. And Matt, we are talking about building a specialty coffee brand in a producing country, and specifically in India. Now, we have spoken about what it's like to establish a specialty coffee market where there wasn't one. The harder part of that element, I suspect, is actually building a workforce. Was that your experience?
Yeah, it was. Because there was no real specialty market when we started, that means that there were no people who we could hire who had the skills that we were looking for. So we basically had to do everything from scratch. Actually starting with ourselves. We weren't from the specialty industry, so we had to upskill ourselves so that
this
we could
is a cappuccino.
But so like in the beginning, for the first two and a half years, I roasted most of the coffee.
Okay.
And then I was able to train train a few people under me to roast the coffee. And actually it's like one of the things that I'm most proud of. And so actually after me, then we had brought in some people from abroad who then led the roastery. But one of the first people that I trained, he's from just a village in West Bengal. And he went to government schools, which is not a great education, but just this last year he passed his Q grader. And for him to be able to come from where he came from and just through his sheer determination and he was just a sponge. Anytime someone would come in, he would just ask them all sorts of questions. And now this last year he passed his Q grader. So that was I was so incredibly proud of him.
Wow.
So I would say that sort of, we've had to do a lot of that is sort of kind of take people with skill set that weren't, I would say very limited skill set, and I grew up in the US, and I often say that someone with a high school degree from the US has the equivalent skills as someone with a college degree and sometimes even MBA from India, just because of the difference in the quality of education at certain levels. Obviously, there's institutions in India that are amazing, but most people that we were hiring from are not coming from there. So just being able to kind of work with the skill set of people that you're hiring, and that was definitely a challenge. And I think, on the roasting side, it's easier to manage because, even at our scale, we have 8-9 roasters. On the cafe is when you're starting to deal with, hundreds and hundreds of people, and equipping those people with the skills to deliver, not just brew the coffee correctly, because that's very important, but more importantly, deliver the level of customer experience that we want. That's been a process for us. So there were, even before we started, there were other coffee chains, but they were, more on the commodity side. And it seemed like the general kind of understanding was that, okay, I've bought this machine that costs several $1,000s. I bought a grinder that costs $7,000. So anybody can just be hired to just press the buttons and make the coffee.
It's so easy, right?
So just, yeah. It's all there in front of you. Just,
just press the buttons.
Done. We had to, and because of that, they were actually paid a very, very low salary, minimum wage salary. And so what we wanted to do is we really wanted to change things where we sort of tried to elevate the position of barista, because not only does it require a lot of effort to brew a good cup of coffee, but really to be able to explain to customers what's different about that coffee. We have a range of different coffees, to be able to guide them to pick a coffee that they would like based on their taste preferences and brewing method. That's something easy. And what we found is that it's much easier to teach people how to brew coffee than it is to teach people how to engage with customers. So in the beginning, we used to hire people from other coffee brands who were baristas because we thought, okay, that'll give them a head start. But actually what's what's more difficult and harder to do is train people to have the confidence to engage with customers.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Mapper Forward's first on-demand workshop, How to Become a Coffee Consultant, available now online for you to learn at your own pace with a certificate available upon completion. Click the link in the show notes to access today for just €50.
And so now we hire mostly a mix, but mostly people who have never worked before, but who are really good at interviewing, have good communication skills, because then it's easier with the kind of training system that we have to be able to for them to deliver the experience, because coffee is something that can be taught much more easily.
One thing that impressed the hell out of me was when you were on the panel, you and Yusuf and Shravan, and I think there was 4 or 5 of you on the panel, and you started talking about the culture that you build, which, you know, I wish even in countries like Australia that have a really well-established coffee industry, that more cafe owners were talking about an intentional culture that they were building in their cafe. We don't have that as much here as you would expect. Whereas it seems to be front and center of what you guys are building at Blue Tokai, that you want a culture in your workplace that you've defined and that you hope that everyone aspires to. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I think, you know, I mean, I grew up in the US, so I was used to that working culture. In India, especially when we started, had more of a hierarchical culture where there's boss and he just tells you what to do. And whereas I kind of took the approach that, you know, we're going to work side by side with everybody. There's not a single job in the company that any of the founding team hasn't done. We've, you know, like I mentioned that I roasted coffee, but we also worked in cafes, we've boxed shipments, we've swept floors, we've done everything. And the idea behind that is that, like, everybody's work has value. Like, we're all working together to deliver the experience that we want to give to the customer, and every single piece in that process needs to happen with whatever, you know, people need to put in the same amount of effort across everything in order for that to happen. And so as part of that, it's about how can we get people to buy into that, and it helps a lot if you're the boss and you're kind of working alongside people really, you know, that transmits. That's something that you know, people will talk about, and they'll try and implement that with their team members. So we've very intentionally built a culture where, you know, everybody's work has value, respect across all levels of organization, try to make it as flat as possible. Even now, people are, you know, anybody in the company has my number. They WhatsApp me if something's happening, and we try and resolve that. So it's a very intentional culture that we built that really tries to celebrate the role of everybody's work.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I wish more cafe owners would recognize the payback that it brings to the entire company when you intentionally build a functional culture in a workplace. It gives people a lot of signals about belonging and what the company stands for, and what they'll tolerate and what they won't tolerate, and what can be expected from them. I think it's really undervalued as a business strategy in coffee.
Yeah, I mean, people will mimic what they see the bosses doing. If they see the bosses shouting at people below them, then they're going to start shouting
100%.
at people below them. If they say that I'm not going to touch that, then they're going to say, you do that, I'm not going to touch that. And I think that, especially in a service environment, there's no way that you can expect people who are miserable to be able to deliver good quality service, right? If you hate going into work, and so, like, even it was always 6 days of work in India, like, for a long time, and from the very beginning we've only done 5 days of work, because we wanted people to have, you know, 2 days off to you know, enjoy the rest of their life. It shouldn't be that you're always at work all the time. So it's about trying to find small things to help improve kind of the day-to-day lives, so that, you know, ultimately happy people are going to deliver a happy experience. Yeah. So that's what it was about.
So as you build Blue Tokai and you start convincing people, like, about this specialty coffee thing, this crazy idea that you've got around specialty coffee, and you want to teach people how to make cappuccinos, and this is going to be a job you can do as a career and stuff like that. How does that start to be received by people who have never heard about specialty coffee and want to trust you and take this endeavor?
So I think it was quite difficult for us to hire in the beginning because people don't see, but the brand wasn't that well known. We're working in an industry that's very niche. They'd rather try and get a job with a multinational company or McDonald's or someone that has that, and even at higher levels of the organization, right? Like, so it was difficult for us. Like, as I mentioned, we didn't have a pool of kind of people with industry experience to draw upon. But even things like in finance, you don't necessarily need specialty coffee experience, right? To run the books, you just need to be a good book, all of these other functions, right? So even there, people are not willing to kind of join because they would rather join some, a bank or something like that.
They didn't see the vision.
So overall, I think it's only now that we've reached a certain kind of scale that we're able to get, that we have more people who are interested in joining us, who are really, have skill sets that we need, who are we're willing to come on. But, at the ground level, I think what does help is that, there are now starting to become people who are interested in coffee. And so people are joining because they see, Blue Tokai and other companies like us who are investing in giving knowledge to people who are interested in coffee and, training them and developing their skills. And I think coffee has now become a bigger thing in India. And that's making it easier, and we're getting sort of a wider pool of people who are interested in joining.
I got to ask you before we wrap up this episode, what was it like when they started tasting specialty coffee, your staff?
So there's a typical journey that happens is that when people join, they just drink tea. Like, they don't even drink coffee. They're like, coffee is bitter. I don't want coffee. They drink tea. Then somehow they start drinking lattes and putting a lot of sugar in. Then they'll move to Americanos, and then so now, like, people, I've seen the whole journey. Then people started drinking light roasted pour overs. So it's very cool to see the journey, both obviously with customers, but even within the staff. Like, it sort of tells you kind of how powerful this product is that we as an industry are working in. That
we're drug dealers, mate. Nice. So in the next episode, we are going to take a look at the difference between what a company like Blue Tokai is doing, what the commercial industry is like. We're going to kind of get a perspective on that, because I suspect that there's a difference, and I don't know, but I suspect that there's a difference between specialty versus commercial in India than the way it is here in Australia or in the United States. So join us for the next episode, folks. Peace, love, and peanut butter. Have an amazing rest of your day. Thanks, friends. If you enjoyed this video, here's what you should check out next. Consider supporting Map It Forward on Patreon, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell before you leave.